so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness which creates and animates all things. After years of exploring this awe-inspiring truth on this podcast, I'm super excited to announce that we are now going even deeper down the rabbit hole on the new late-night style consciousness-elevating talk show called Optimistic, which features none other than you, the listeners. Optimistic is taped out of the epic spaceship-esque 8-bedroom property we call the Mystic Manor that myself and the rest of the Optimistic crew now navigate reality from in Venice Beach, California. And you are invited to come experience a Mystic Manor immersion week with us. During your week-long stay, you'll enjoy unique workshops, chef-prepared meals, one-on-one time coaching and consulting with me, and even co-creating magic with me as a guest on both Optimistic and an episode of the Positive Head podcast. When I started this, my aim with these immersive retreats was to facilitate the ultimate spiritual upgrade and tune-up, so to speak, for our guests while providing them with one of the most memorable experiences of their lives. And I'm happy to say that as of this recording, every guest at the end of their trip so far has told me that they have had a profound and transformational experience at the Mystic Manor and that they definitely want to come back. All that being said, we only have a limited number of spots available between now and next July. And as of this recording, about half of those spots are already filled. So if there's any part of you that is screaming, yes, I want to come, I feel like I need to be there, go now and book a slot with me to discuss how we can put our heads together and make it happen at calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. I know for some people, there is also that little voice in their head saying, why not? I can't get off work. I can't afford it, and on and on and on. But, really Henry Ford, I think, said it best. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And I'm confident that where there's a will, there's a way. And I'm personally committed to doing everything in my power, including discounts and payment plans, to get you here if it is something that truly feels like a huge yes for you energetically and like you're meant to be here. Once again, the link to book time to discuss with me is calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. That's spelled calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. All one word, of course. And book in some time and look forward to seeing you soon here at the Mystic Manor. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm excited to have Jonathan Levi here with me on the show. Jonathan is the founder of an online school that has helped teach over 150,000 people memory skills and how to speed read. He calls it the Superhuman Academy. He's also the host of the Superhuman Academy podcast. Jonathan, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me, Brandon. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man, we're going to dive right in. We're in a little bit of a tighter time frame than normal with one of these interview style episodes. So we're going to dive right into the deep end of the pool. Before we do that, I do want to remain as predictable as I always am, and that's with my same opening question, and that is this: you're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
10 floors, I only need one. My passion is empowering people by designing solutions to the problems that people face. I'm deeply passionate about creating new solutions and finding ways to solve problems. And I'm deeply passionate about empowering people to achieve more than they ever thought they could.
Wow, I like the sound of that. Well, why don't you, if you would, give us a real quick backstory? Just how did you end up, doing what it is you do?
Yeah, it's a bit of a surprise to myself as well. I, growing up, was not a gifted learner. In fact, I struggled very much in school and outside of school, socially with the learning the social skills, and in the classroom, learning the academic skills, which led me by the age of 13 to be suicidally depressed and kind of thinking that I would never really amount to much of anything. So I was really the last person that you'd expect to be writing best-selling books on memory. Sometimes I think to myself, like, wow, if 13-year-old me could see me now. I got really, really lucky. I had to be medicated just to sit through school and graduate from high school and college. And when I say medicated, I mean pretty heavily medicated to sit still in the classroom. And I kind of just thought, like, I'm smart, but not at the things that most people are smart at. In fact, when I discovered entrepreneurship, it saved my life because it was the first time I could be proud of something that I actually could do well. But I got really, really lucky somewhere along the way. And when I say lucky, I mean the forces of the universe conspired in my favor. And I met two people, a husband and wife named Lev and Anna, who had been working with kids with learning disabilities like mine in memory and speed reading. And I immediately signed up for their coaching, and they helped me, and they really unlocked this possibility within me. And I realized that I'd been learning the wrong way, and that pretty much everyone is learning the wrong way. And then the last 10 years of my life has just been a story of taking that skill and applying it to all kinds of crazy stuff, whether that be my personal life and improving my relationships and romantic life, whether that be launching my business, doing podcasts, creating online courses, all these things that I knew nothing about. But empowered with this skill of accelerated learning, I've just been able to, knock on wood, and I'm very grateful and very blessed, but I've been able to climb one mountain after another, which is why I titled the latest book I wrote, The Only Skill That Matters, because I fundamentally believe, and my life experience has taught me, that if you can learn quickly and effectively, there's kind of nothing you can't do. And I always put an asterisk around that, because probably with my genetics, I'm never going to deadlift 1,000 kilos. It's probably never going to happen. But everything else is negotiable. Right.
And, if you get in the right state of, let's reference back to, a past guest, Dr. Bruce Lipton, his book, Biology of Belief. If you change that belief, who knows, you might be deadlifting even more. But I suppose that's a whole nother podcast conversation, right?
That is true.
So let's, if you would, share with us what you feel is most relevant. Like, obviously, speed reading and learn. There is so much information out there these days. It's overwhelming. It's like, what do I take in? I think of my son right now. He's in this phase in his life where, he's just, a couple years out of high school, and like, okay, what do I want to consume everything. I want to learn all that and he's such a sponge. And obviously if he can become more efficient learning, any of us, that it completely changes our trajectory and potential. So, what are some of the hacks and things that make sense, to share in a short podcast?
Absolutely. So the first thing that I really want to impress upon people is, some people, have more advantages out of the box than others. But when it comes to learning and memory, study after study, and just studying the brains of the world's most proficient learners, readers, and specifically memory experts. People who can sit down and memorize 38 decks of cards in an hour, back to back to back, and recite them backwards and forwards. When you study the brains of these people, you discover they actually don't have any genetic or structural advantage. It's not like the Olympics where, look, Michael Phelps's arms are just longer than they should be, and that's why he's gonna remain the fastest swimmer on the planet for a while. He's a freak, right? In a good way, I mean that. But when it comes to studying the world's top memorization experts, their brains are just like ours. And the cool thing is their brains behave differently. They're structurally the same, but they behave differently. And studies have shown that with a few short weeks of practicing and using your brain the way that they do, and I'll get into exactly what that means in a moment, you can actually get your brain to irrevocably behave in the same way as their brains do. Meaning, you can now become a sponge. I love that term you mentioned with regards to your son. You can become a sponge and actually retain everything that you're memorizing. So how do we actually do that? First thing is we need to learn how to actually use our memories. We're never taught how to use our memory. And it's a real shame. It kind of harkens to Aristotle, I believe. No, I'm sorry. It was Socrates who said that writing, which was a pretty new innovation in his time, writing weakens the memory and softens the mind because we never try to use our memory anymore. He believed that anyone who wanted to study with him had to memorize everything that they learned with him.
Wow.
So how do we do this? There are techniques that the ancient Greeks knew about, which have kind of fallen by the wayside over the last 2,500 years. But the ancient Greeks were using these techniques. And the fundamentals, I always like to break it down to 3 simple things that people can remember. The first one is pictures. We know that our memories are heavily dominant towards pictures. Neuroscientists call this the picture superiority effect. So one of the most important things that we teach in the superlearner methodology is how to turn anything that you would want to remember, whether that's names, numbers, foreign language words, Bible verses, poetry, speeches, you name it, decks of cards, anything that you can think of that you might want to remember, it needs to get converted into a picture. And that's the first piece of magic. Number 2 is connections. Okay. Our brains work a lot like the Google search algorithm, the algorithm that made Google the only game in town as far as search is concerned. They ask, how many things is this piece of information connected to? And how important or relevant are those pieces of information? Therefore, if I want to make something memorable, I need to consciously create as many connections as possible. And I'll explain a little further on that. Many people look at something new and they go, oh, I don't know anything in Norwegian. This is the only word I know in Norwegian, which is a nice way to tell your brain this is completely unimportant because we've never needed a single word in Norwegian before. Why would we need this? When a super learner looks at something, they immediately try to create as many connections to it as possible. What does it remind me of? What does it sound like to me? How can I connect it and visualize, again, coming back to point number 1, how can I visualize pre-existing imagery in my mind so that when I need to use this word, I have many paths to get back to it. So point number 1 is pictures. Point number 2 is connections. And point number 3 that I really want everyone to play around with is locations. Okay, we've been evolving in our hominid format for millions of years. And before that, in our mammalian format. We are really, really good at remembering locations. You ever notice how if a dog gets left at the county fair, the dog somehow knows his way home? That's a survival skill for most animals on this planet, and we're no different. If you forget where you buried the winter food supply, you're done. If you forget your way back to the watering hole, you don't find it within a couple of days, you're done.
Right.
So we're really, really good at memorizing locations. And in fact, recent research has actually shown that memory may be inextricably linked to location in our brain. Now, that's a bold claim, but what is the first thing, Brandon, someone asks you when they talk about a major event such as JFK's assassination, such as the 9/11 attacks? What's the first thing they ask?
Where did it happen?
Or where were you when you heard?
Yeah, right.
It's never what news station were you watching. It's never how old were you. The first thing you think of is where were you when you heard that Princess Diana had died. And we all know exactly where we were. And that's why, because memory is so deeply enrooted in location. Now, how do we use that practically? Well, there's, again, a 2,500-year-old technique called the memory palace. Sometimes they call it the method of Loci. And yes, if you're a Sherlock fan, this is what Sherlock Holmes used, and it actually is a real thing. The idea is very simple. We take these connected visualizations and we place them into basically a library of visualizations in our mind. And by doing that, we're able to create perfect and indexed memory. So anytime you see someone like me stand up on a stage and do something theatrical, like I'll have, people shout out numbers and I'll memorize them and then I'll repeat 50 digits forwards and backwards or something like that. I'm doing that with a memory palace. And, a lot of my contemporaries, folks like Jim Quick, will do the exact same thing. We're just using a memory palace, and it makes it as easy as, if not easier, than reading it off of a piece of paper.
Wow.
So those are 3 really, really powerful, actionable tips. If you do that, the next time you meet someone named Christian, for example, imagine Christian carrying the cross down Via Dolorosa, which for me is a particularly vivid visualization because I visit Jerusalem very often. I live in Israel. The next time you meet someone named Ross, picture him in a situation from Friends, or picture him shopping at the store Ross, whatever is going to be relevant for you. But the most important thing is picture. You have to picture everything you want to remember.
Yeah. So when you talk about remembering like 50 numbers, I mean, can you give us some insight into what it is that, obviously you can't picture Ross, right? I mean, that's a great example. It's easy for someone to relate to that, but the number 32, and that's going to be in a sequence.
32 is man. I've got a symbol ready. I'll explain how that works though, because it is a really, really good question. There is a great system out there called the major method. What it allows you to do is convert every single digit into a consonant, and then you have vowels, which don't mean anything. W doesn't mean anything. Y doesn't mean anything. So for example, 3 is M, 2 is N. So 32 would be mean, man, moan, mine. It could even be mini. So if I were stringing things together, like 3, 2, 5, 4, let's say, that's MNLR. So mini lure. It's a fishing visualization, or Manny, Manny Lear. You could come up with all these different visualizations, and that's how you would do it, and that's how I do it. Now, for speed, what a lot of people like to do, and what I do when I do a high pressure kind of demonstration, is I actually have ready-made symbols for 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, all the way up to 99. So when you give me 99, it's Bob from Bob's Burgers. When you give me 09, it's a Saab, the old cars that I think they went out of business, but it's a Saab that I remember from my childhood. And on and on. 22 is a nun, and on and on. And when you get, by the way, to the most advanced levels, people are actually the way. So when I say world record holders use these techniques, I mean literally these exact techniques, and they put them into memory palaces. The only difference between them, memorizing thousands of digits in an hour, is they actually have systems to memorize 7+ digits in one visualization. There's a way of kind of compressing and creating more information in fewer visualizations, because ultimately you're limited by the number of visualizations. And if you can get 7 digits into one visualization, but we teach that in some of our programs, but it's kind of unnecessary for most people. Like if you want to memorize your credit card numbers really quickly, you can just use the major method that I mentioned before.
Interesting. So then once you've sort of assigned some sort of visualization to each number, then if someone's telling you, okay, remember this series of numbers, you instantly start applying those pictures to it. And it's kind of like I remember learning a way to remember the solar system, for example, as a kid, which was very similar, My very educated mother just served us 9 pickles or whatever, or 9 pizzas. So
exactly. And what's cool about doing things this way, by the way, is like I said, you have indexed knowledge, right? So people always say like, oh, well, why not just make a song? And I always go, great. What's the 11th letter of the alphabet? And they go A, B, C, D, E, and okay, yeah, got it. With a memory palace, you just know you have your stations numbered. So, most people can't do the alphabet backwards. But if you like, one of my favorite and most used, by the way, Memory Palace, is people think that I would use it for something different, but I spend so much time on the phone that I use the NATO phonetic alphabet a lot. You know, the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, that whole thing that you hear. Niner.
Yeah.
So
Roger,
one of my
Roger.
favorite memory palaces, exactly. One of my favorite memory palaces is the NATO phonetic alphabet. So I can do the alphabet backwards. I can do it from the middle out. I can, so it's, and that's just one example. Like, another example I like to give people, imagine you're doing a public lecture and you've memorized it in a memory palace versus what a lot of people do, which is just repeating it over and over and over. But then imagine your slides malfunction. You ever see someone giving a lecture and their slides malfunction, or, someone in the audience kind of interrupts them or something happens, and all of a sudden they have to stand there and go, okay, and they're repeating it under their breath to get back on track. With a memory palace, that doesn't happen. I just jump right back in. It's like, oh, right, I was in the bedroom at this point. Boom. Here we go.
Gotcha. Interesting. So what are, I know you've been doing, of course, a podcast for a while as well, and you sort of highlight people that are having, different things that are comparable to this, different takeaways, hacks, entrepreneurial hacks, things like that. So I'm curious, that your podcast, this one, even for us, is a little bit of a different episode. Typically we're going pretty deep down the consciousness shifting perspective, discussing the ultimate nature of reality and sort of
we can do that.
Synchronicities and serendipities and things like that. Cool. Well, yeah, well, good, because I'm going to take you there either way. So, but I am curious. I love any sort of all of this stuff. It's so super useful to learn, this sort of stuff. Yes. And I know you, as someone who's focused primarily on, this lane, if you will. I'm curious, with your podcast, what are some of the other great hacks and life hacks that you've learned that, jump out to you that would be good to share?
Oh man, that is a great question to ask me. I actually have a list on our website that people can actually download for free. I'll send you the link, and people can visit in the show notes. I just remembered you asked me before, like, what should we give people? And I was like, I don't have anything, but no, I have a list of my 75 superhuman hacks that I actually have implemented from 260 episodes. So I'll figure out a way to get that to all your wonderful positive heads out there. To give you some of the highlights, you won't be surprised to hear meditation comes up again and again and again, almost in every episode.
Surprise
when
face.
we started doing the podcast, exactly. When we started doing the podcast, it was like, wait, meta what? Today it's become really, really mainstream. Sleep again. And I'm not talking like, I get in bed at like 1 a.m. and I read on my iPhone for a little bit, but then I sleep in till 8 a.m. No, I'm talking like sleep sanctuary, proper sleep nutrition, wind down routine, blocking all forms of blue light, 2 hours, like going hardcore biohacker with the sleep just seems to come up again and again and again. One of my favorite hacks, journaling. It took a long time for my friend Benjamin Hardy to convince me that I should be journaling, but now I try not to miss a day. Wim Hof method. So the Wim Hof breathing, I don't always do the ice baths. It's actually quite hard to get a very cold shower where I live, which is a humble brag about how wonderful the climate is in Israel. But, I do the Wim Hof breathing quite often. And I just find like I do it while I journal sometimes, and you can just see at the top of the page, I'm like, oh, didn't sleep so good. Pissed off. Yesterday was really stressful. And then, I'm doing it as I'm writing. And then by the end of the page, invariably, I'm like, let's crush this day. It's going to be awesome. So it's a complete state change. Exercise, not going to surprise anybody, but I have found for myself that I need to do very high intensity exercise. So most of my workouts, if I'm not hitting 184 BPM, which is a lot for me because I'm now coming up on 33 years old. So my maximal heart rate is 190. I try to hit 184 BPM at least 3 workouts a week. If I don't, I just turn into like a poopy pants. As we mentioned, depression is in my neurochemistry. There's a history of depression and suicide in my family. So like, I know that I can become a total Debbie Downer. And also, talking about the nature of reality, like if I'm not exercising, if my nutrition's not dialed in, I can have some pretty serious bouts of like detachment from reality and just feeling like I'm in a dream state, feeling cloudy, feeling really kind of like weirded out, if you will. So I just know that like getting into my body and getting those endorphins going. I'll shout out also to a couple products that I really love, because I can tell you and I are on the same vibe here, Brendan. I love the Aura Ring. I use it constantly. It's on me at all times. Blue blocking glasses.
Hold on, what is that?
The Aura Ring. It's it's an activity and sleep tracker, but it's very, very low EMF. It just sits on your finger. It's Bluetooth, ultra low energy. I've actually tested this, so I'm quite a geek with this stuff, and I have tested the Aura Ring's electromagnetic emission compared to an Apple Watch, compared to a Fitbit, compared to the wireless router that I used to have bolted under the standing desk, exactly where my groin is. You better believe I disabled that router, and we're now hardwire in the house after that test.
Interesting.
So I like the Aura Ring. I personally love Four Sigmatic products. They're my homies. The Four Sigmatic mushroom coffees.
I've been talking to them actually about shouting them out on the show here, because they're awesome. Such great products.
I love their products, and Ari, I'm sure is the person you're speaking to, and he's my guy.
Yep.
And what else? What are some other hacks that I really, really like? I think that's plenty, right? That's plenty for people to play around with. They can download the list of 75 hacks if they want to get more.
Cool. That's awesome. So let's get a little bit weird. What is...
let's do it.
I love, on the show, I typically ask stories of synchronicity, serendipity, something super inspirational, even perhaps positive paranormal story. Got anything like that up your sleeve? Yeah,
man. I got quite a few.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Right. So I went pretty deep down the psychedelics rabbit hole for a bit there.
Yep.
And
definitely done that.
Yep. And I think my most terrifying experience, it's not so much a supernatural experience, but it's really a connection to like the oneness, was at the time a particularly bad trip. And what caused this bad trip was really going into this kind of like philosophical idea of I think, therefore I am, and kind of realizing that I'll never be able to prove to myself that I'm not the only consciousness in existence, meaning like this could all be in my head, right? So I thought it was crazy. I went researching a little more. It turns out there's actually a very big unsolved problem in the field of philosophy. It's called solipsism, or the problem of other minds. And it took me a long time to get over that, honestly. But then I came around to this idea that I think everyone comes to, which is this idea of the oneness. Like when enlightened people far more enlightened than I, obviously, talk about the oneness, this is kind of what they're talking about. That like we're all connected in this field of consciousness because we have no way of knowing that there is any other consciousness but our own. And so that experience very much unites us.
Right. Yeah, I definitely subscribe even to that as like the way it's structured, this idea that like, okay, I'm the only one here. I've never experienced through the lens of your body, your mind, anyone else for that matter. And so, yeah, I very much, and it can be a little unsettling, right? When you think about, I talk about it many times on the show. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Fountain. But it's a great movie. I highly recommend it. There's a point where the guy is, it's all these different lifetimes kind of tied together. And at one point, the guy snaps out of one of his lifetimes, and he's all of a sudden, the real him is floating in the cosmos, in like lotus pose, right? And it was all in his mind. And so I believe that's what's really going on in a very good way for each of us. We're these focal points of source consciousness, and everything is a prop in my movie, and I'm truly the only one here. And you start playing with that idea, and it can be a little unsettling because it's like, hold on, this is a really lonely affair then if I'm the only one in this whole universe. And the short story The Egg, actually, I don't know if you're familiar with the short story The Egg. That's another great one. There's if you go you can read it, or if you go onto YouTube, it's about 10 minutes. There's a few versions of it where they've made it into video production. I recommend the one where God is the little English woman. She's super cute version of God. That's a really good one. But I highly recommend checking that out as well. And it helps to paint the picture. And, from one perspective, it maybe is a little terrifying when you start to think like, oh my gosh, I'm alone. And, what are we? We're fractals of source, right? The one. Well, right. One implies there is no other, right? So we're having to come to terms with the same thing that our higher self, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, it has to come to terms with. And that is like, I'm the only one that exists. And so ultimately, this whole journey becomes a journey of self-love, right? It's the ultimate, love story is falling in love with yourself because there are no others, right? And so I think there is something really beautiful about that notion. So that helps to sort of bring me peace. It's like, we're doing the same thing that God is doing. It's fractalized, and we're chips off the block. And and that's why I believe the number one thing we're all here to learn is self-love for that very reason. Yes. And also, there's this amazing quote that's actually graffitied right up the street from my house. And it totally helps because, when I have these bouts of derealization, which are often, by the way, caused by anxiety. I discovered that this is actually a pretty common symptom of anxiety. And people who have a history of depression are pretty we get all the good stuff. We get anxiety too. It's free. It's an add-on. But wait, there's more. Exactly. So I love this quote. The vastness of life is only bearable through love. And it ties in so beautifully. It's like the only way that you can feel grounded with this idea and thought that you are alone in the universe, hurtling through the ether, is love. And even if that person that you love is a construct of your own imagination, it sure makes you feel a lot less lonely. Yeah, absolutely. I love that quote, and I definitely agree. It's like, it's all, I believe, happening for love. Like, that is the underlying thread and chord for all of the experience is that very thing. But you need the contrast in order for that to mean anything. If God is one, it's all one and it's love, right? Well, that's the same thing as being nothing, because there's no other, there's no contrast. And so we create the contrast. We create the illusion of other so that we can have the experience of relating to ourselves in some way. Yep. And it becomes a beautiful thing to start playing from that perspective, living your life from that perspective of everywhere I go, I'm there waiting for myself. And so I'm going to, act as if, okay, you truly are an extension of me. And, then it becomes what's good for you is good for me. And I believe once you start applying that perspective, that's when life, to me, the proof is in the results it gets, because it really just opens up so much when you start, instead of this separation mentality. And it also is very empowering because, you think about it, it's like, okay, so if I'm a fractal of source consciousness, and I've talked about this quite a bit before, there's a great, I wish I had saved it a year or so ago. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the quantum physicist Nassim Haramein, but he posted a great image of it was like a twisting 3D graphic where it had these nodes, and it was like twisting, infinitely in both directions. And on this, this visualization, there was nodes on all over this graph. And he's like, every single node is the center. If you were to go and sit on that dot, you're in the middle of everything. And that's what I believe is happening with us. Source is infinite in its scope and what it can create. And you are, the apparatus through which one version of all potentiality is observing and creating. And so it empowers for me to think, okay, well, of course I'm going to make it and, overcome the obstacles and have a big breakthrough and create an incredible magical life. There's no one else here. All the statistics and what's happening over in Afghanistan or any of these things that I hear, they're noise in my own private movie that I've created and I am currently co-creating. And of course, I'm going to have an epic journey. There are no others. And so for me, that really serves me in an empowering way, and also tapping into that idea that like, oh wow, like it's kind of beautiful that it's a journey of falling in love with the self.
Totally. Well, you know what intimacy really means. It's into me, I see.
Right. Exactly. Getting intimate with the self.
Exactly.
Cool.
And
Love it.
That you do on RedTube, right?
What's that? Yeah, totally different.
Different kind of into me, I see, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. So, we, as I mentioned at the top of this, we have a little less time than I normally do with the Soul Share episodes. So as we sort of wind down here, Jonathan, what is most, Mike? I guess my question for you is, what's most alive for you? What comes up, as the most exciting thing in your world, and that you feel the most compelled to share? I guess that could be two questions.
Right now, I'm actually in a process of real self-discovery. I've been working with a coach to kind of rediscover some of my passion for my work. I know it doesn't sound like I'm lacking in passion, but in the day-to-day management of the company. And what I've realized is I'm a creator, Brandon. I like to create stuff. I like to make things. I like to solve problems. And as this is now my second company that I've grown to 7 figures, and in my last one, around about this growth level and this staff level, I also got burnt out. So I did some self-work around that. And I realized that it's not that I thought it was, I lose interest in the subject after 7 years. It's not that. It's that when you've been working at a company for 7 years and you've scaled to a certain level, you kind of end up doing only certain tasks. And a lot of the time, that ends up being meetings or managing other people. And it turns out I hate those two things. What I love doing is creating. I just like creating, man.
That's so my story. You're telling me my story.
Totally. And only recently have my leadership coaches and business coaches and all the people that I work with who empower me to do the work that I do, have they given me the permission that I wish I'd given myself, which is like, you can be a leader without being a manager. You can be an entrepreneur without having to be a hands-on CEO. And it's okay to say, the only work that I want to do is creative, problem solving, building. And I was not comfortable giving myself that permission ever, because I thought it sounded like prima donna, or I thought it was just all I needed to, I relate to the world in terms of what do I need to learn to achieve what I want to achieve. But there are some things, and I'm the learning guy, but there are some things that I will just never enjoy learning and I'll never enjoy doing. I would love to be a programmer, because I think programmers are really in an exciting position to build our future. But you know what? I just, something about sitting and typing code just makes me batty. I need to be creating, with my hands. I like to be building things to see, and so it just doesn't vibe for me. Yeah.
Gosh, I so relate to that. That is like my story reflected back to me. Really,
that's awesome.
I went, from Friend's Couch in 2010 to an Inc. 500 fastest growing private company in the U.S. Actually grew to 8 figures. Cool. And cool. And then a second company that's 7 figures. And I'm the exact same way as this creator, which, by the way, of course we're creators. We're one with source. And what does it do? It creates, when we refer to God as the creator, right? So we are most alive when we're being creative. And I believe that goes for everyone. Of course, there's some people who really enjoy creating, hardcore spreadsheets. For me,
Exactly.
being much more visionary, high level, sort of quirky entrepreneur, that's more my jam than, okay, I've grown this to 100 employees, and it's a very, meeting after meeting and taking and then sitting down with people in the very traditional sort of framework with lots of suits and, traditional values and thoughts. And it's like, oh my gosh, get me out of here.
Well, do you believe everyone is a creator though? Do you believe everyone has that need to create?
I do. I believe it's different levels of types of creativity, but I believe everyone, and it doesn't mean everyone's is actually exploring that or tapped into their creativity. However, I believe at some level where we're all going to find our fulfillment in some way being creative. And there, obviously that's a very broad way that can happen. Yeah. But I personally believe we are fractals of source consciousness, and what does source do? It creates, and it is most fulfilled when it's creating. And when you become stagnant, there's no creativity in your life. And if there's no creativity of any kind in your life, then there's usually a lot of stagnant energy and unfulfilled, there's nowhere to go. There's nothing new to make. There's nothing, I'm just stagnant. I'm on repeat, a Groundhog Day kind of thing. And so, I do believe that. And it's finding our way through and realizing that, like you said, and I think you're very wise to realize, like, hold on, I don't have to be these things that aren't in my highest excitement. There's someone else who will be perfect for that I just need to, identify and help to steer the ship and play the part, be the part of the jigsaw puzzle I'm supposed to play. And I think that's a really important takeaway for any of us that are working in any sort of, organization or team type structure.
Absolutely.
Well, I know we are running out of time here, Jonathan, and I do have. This has been awesome to connect, and I've really enjoyed the quick fire. I mean, it's actually like perfect for what it is that you teach too. It's like a great reflection. It's like, hack. Let's do this quick, And I love that. Totally. It's like it's all reflections around here. And I do have one last question as we wind down, and that question is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Jonathan Levi?
The meaning of life is to be happy. That's what the Dalai Lama says, and I take it on good authority that he knows a lot more than I do. He's on his 9th iteration of this life. But I believe the meaning of life is to be happy, and there are a lot of things that can make you happy, but I think one of them is creating, and the other is being in service to others. And I don't think there are a lot of other things that can make you happy, and I mean that from a deep place of happiness. A delicious meal makes me very happy, but it's not a sustainable form of happiness. Service to others, human and otherwise, by the way. That's a pretty good way to be happy.
I'm with that. And I would like to add to that. It's like, Gandhi said, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. And the reason I believe that holds true is because there are no others. And this is how we actually give to ourselves. This is how the energy comes back to us, is, once you start understanding that separation is an illusion. And I would also like to add, happiness, I think it does come and go. I think even the evolution of happiness being the focus is being at peace with what is, and understanding that, without the valley, the peak doesn't mean much. And so when you are in the valley, to understand, okay, this is challenging. I'm going to, whatever arises, I'm going to learn to love that to the best of my ability, and also understand, even though it may be challenging, that this is serving all the goodness that comes beyond it, right? It's giving me that contrast. It's making it all worth it. And then you can find peace even when it's an unhappy moment, not necessarily something you would have chosen. And that's served me very well. And this conversation has served me well. I really appreciate you taking the time, Jonathan,
man.
to
it's been
connect.
a pleasure to connect.
Absolutely. And for those of you guys out there who want to actually maybe get involved with Jonathan's work, or, go check out the Superhuman Academy and sign up for one of you have it set up as like workshop kind of. Can you quickly explain how people could
we
learn
have
more?
all different levels of programs. We've got a 5-day memory mastery course, which is like, I don't have time, just help me. And then we have all the way up to a 10-week intensive program that will completely rewire your brain. Yes, I can make that claim because studies have actually proven it. And we got everything in between. We have courses on productivity. We have courses on health. We have courses on organizing your digital life, career hacking. So I try to partner with top experts, learn everything that they know, and help them produce content, because I know a thing or two about learning and online courses. So we've got a course for everybody, and we're here to serve. That's literally why my company exists. So hit us up.
Perfect. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes. So if you guys want to go and check those things out. Other than that, all of you out there, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and co-create with Jonathan and myself. Till next time, journey well. Love you all so much. And if you're feeling the call to come for a week retreat style Mystic Manor immersion, remember to go now and book your time to speak with me directly about stepping into the optimistic vortex at calendly.com/talk with Brandon while there are still spots left. Otherwise, I look forward to co-creating magic with you at the Mystic Manor.